way that they recorded that was to have some guy in a booth with a microphone just going. Hello retro lovers and welcome back. As I record this today, it is Friday the 13th of August 2021. So just to fill a bit of a gap on the channel, because I'm currently working quite hard on some videos that are taking quite a bit of time, I just thought I would do a rewatch of Friday the 13th, the original one, and then do a quick sort of review here about my thoughts on it and what I initially think of it. It's kind of boring. That's my initial thought about it. It's the franchise, the Friday the 13th franchise. It's kind of like you kind of either like it or you don't, in my opinion. That seems to be opinions of others as well on the net. It does have its kind of memorable moments, and of course Jason Voorhees, the character with the mask and the machete and the big, the big frame of a body, he's become quite a famous cult icon, which I understand, I suppose. He has his, the physical traits and everything, the way that he looks and the way that he progressively looks as the films go on. It's understandable why he's become such a kind of famous, iconic character. However, that doesn't mean necessarily that the films themselves are automatically good, because this is a spoiler review, by the way. There are spoilers in this, so if you haven't seen it, there is a bit of a twist. Well, not exactly, but there's a kind of twisty ending. So if you haven't seen it, then maybe go and see it, then come back and check this video out. But it's interesting that we're so familiar, of course, with Jason Voorhees, being the killer. But of course, in this original 1980 film, he's not the killer. There is a twisty bit at the end, and it turns out not to be Jason after all. Well, I'll come back to that in a minute. But it turns out, of course, to be Pamela Voorhees' mother, who is kind of an anticlimactic killer, really, because it's kind of funny that all the characters that get killed off, they face the camera and they say, "Oh, hi, it's you. What are you doing out here?" And then they get killed. And it's interesting how the person that they're talking to, who turns out to be Pamela Voorhees, Jason's mother, she never says anything to them. They say, "Oh, hi." Nothing. "What are you doing here?" Nothing. It's kind of cheesy like that. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's have a look. I've written some notes here. Let me just take a look here. The first thing that I put in my notes was camp cheese. Because that's kind of how I see it. It's very cheesy. It's very corny. Literally right from the get-go. Even though the very beginning it takes place in the 50s and then it jumps forward to the 80s. It's very cheesy. There's lots. It's your typical American camp, by the lake scenario, gathered round a fire, playing, Kumbaya on a guitar and all that rubbish. And it's kids teenagers sneaking off to have sex, and of course they're the ones that die. And Scream covers this. It's basically that. It's all of the rules of a typical slasher horror film. You don't have sex. You don't say "I'll be right back." You don't none of that. So of course, the very first thing that we see in the movie is that there's teenagers at a camp by the lake playing Kumbaya. Two of them sneak off to have sex, and they get killed off first. And they're not the only ones to have sex in the film, or get killed straight afterwards. So yeah, it's all very camp cheese. There's a lot of that. What else? Yeah, there's this whole sort of, as I said at the beginning of the video, there's this whole, Now, one could argue that that is actually quite effective, but whilst I kind of like it in a cult, kind of way, I kind of also find it annoying. The music as well, it's very very psycho-y. There's lots of strings going on. There's lots of, I call it darting music. It's music that kind of darts about, like it's kind of difficult to explain, but anyway, it's very psycho. And as I said earlier, just now, I'd come back to it with Pamela Voorhees, the mother, the killer. There is a kind of psycho element to it. I say that Jason's not the killer, but maybe psychologically in some way he is, because you do see Mrs. Voorhees talking with Jason's voice as a child's voice, killer mommy, killer mommy, don't let her get away. So there is a kind of psycho twist about it, which I kind of like in a way. It does. Mind you, this was after Psycho, so maybe I would have liked it a bit more if this was before Psycho. Anyway, it's there's a little bit of that in there. I see it as maybe, I don't know whether it was intentional nod towards Psycho or not. Maybe it was pretty cool if it was. I kind of like that, because who wouldn't want to give a little nod to Psycho in their horror film? I certainly would if I was making a horror film. So what else? The music. I'm not sure whether it's kind of annoying or not. There's a bit too much of it. Well, not too much of it, but it's the scenes where there is music, I kind of find it unnecessary, and there's a bit too much of it. Maybe I kind of thought to myself, you can just ease off a bit. However, there are a lot of scenes where there just isn't enough of it. So maybe it's a kind of 50-50 thing where there could have been more of it in some scenes and less of it in others, if that makes sense. But anyway, it's kind of good. I think, it has... it's memorable. I suppose that's one of the things that this franchise has going for it. It's memorable. I mean, bottom line is we're not going to forget, forget it. I mean, I kind of like, doing the kind of thing. Maybe it's just not as memorable as, like, say, The Exorcist or Halloween. Everyone knows, knows the music to those films. Camp cliche, I think I've covered that. There's a lot of cliches about it, sneaking off, to have sex and all that. Cheapness to it, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah, particularly at the beginning, there seemed to be this kind of cheap quality about it. I don't know whether that was intentional or not, but the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original one, another classic that I've seen several times, there is this kind of cheap kind of quality, like a grainy, low budget quality to it, like a B-movie kind of thing. And this film, Friday the 13th, has that kind of, as I say, at least towards the beginning. It kind of, not so much towards the second half, but in the beginning, there's a lot of shaky cam, and there's a lot of there's a graininess to it. I don't know too much about the budget of this film. I don't think it was that much. I certainly believe that the budget increased as the films went on, particularly with Jason X, the futuristic one set on out in space. Obviously, the budget was higher for that one, but in this one, I don't think the budget was too high, and I think it shows. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I sometimes, like in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, sometimes that can add to it. That can add to the real, kind of like the Blair Witch Project in that regard. Giving it a kind of found footage kind of quality to it, that can kind of add to the fear and the suspense of it all, like it's all happening right in front of you, which I kind of like, especially with the earlier horror films like this one. So yeah, that kind of adds to it, for the most part anyway. What else? I've put here, a bit silly. I just heard the person doesn't talk. Yeah, the person that they're talking to when they say, "Oh, hi, it's you," doesn't say anything for some reason. However, there are moments that I kind of thought to myself, what are you, crazy? Just look to your right and you'll see who's looking at you. There's this one scene where the girl is walking past. You can see that through the POV of the camera, as if you're looking through someone's eyes, they're simply hiding behind a tree, but not even that well. They're just hiding. They're just sort of loosely looking from behind a tree at this person walking meters, just 2 or 3 meters in front of them. And I just thought to myself, oh, come on, just look to your right and you'll see that there's someone standing there, because they're not even doing a good job of hiding, you know. So that kind of got a bit silly, in my opinion. I think that happened throughout the entirety of the film as well, until Mrs. Voorhees appeared in her truck. You know, I kind of got to wondering, if you're going to show yourself at the end anyway, why didn't you just show up to begin with and not be so subtle with it? I know it's just one of those silly nitpicky things, but that's one of the things about it. What else? Practical effects, pretty good. Yeah, I'll go along with that. The practical effects, yes, pretty effective for the time. I don't think there's any like special effects. There's no like computer generated kind of effects in this, but the practicals are actually pretty good. Oh damn! I should have noted who it was that did it. But yeah, they're okay. I mean, you know, there's some work better than others, I think. But for the most part, I think they work. There's a scene at the beginning where a girl gets her throat cut, and it does genuinely, I think, look like a pretty decent, you know, authentic looking slash across the throat that starts to bleed. When Kevin Bacon gets the arrow through his throat, that kind of looks good and it kind of doesn't at the same time. There's, you know, because it's dead center and blood kind of, they overdo the blood a little bit. You know, I don't think that would be like very bloody if it was like right in the middle, because there's nothing. I mean, I know I'm nitpicking again. It's just, you know, anatomically, I don't think that kind of worked as well. But the effect of the arrow going through his throat looked kind of good when his head gets pinned down to the bed. Pretty good scene. And the famous axe going into the face, the girl's face. Yeah, it's all right. You know, obviously it looks like it's an axe that's been stuck to her face there with some blood. But yeah, as fake axes stuck to faces go, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. I've seen worse. Put it that way. I've seen much worse. I've seen much worse in these films, the Friday the 13th films. So I think, yeah, not too bad. I think it could have been worse. I think, as I say, the budget is obviously quite low for this film, but I think a lot of it went towards the practical effects, understandably, I suppose. And the guy pinned to the door with the arrows was pretty neat. You know, I think that worked more or less okay. The one practical effect that didn't work was Mrs. Voorhees getting her head cut off. That was kind of stupid. The girl takes just one swipe with a machete, not even that aggressively, and the head just goes clean off as if it was like a knife through butter. I don't think that would have. Nah, that didn't really work. So that was a bit daft, but everything else I think worked more or less okay. Yeah. So I should say. Okay. What else? Now, is there too much sex? Yeah, but to be expected in a film like this for the time period, I guess. It's a 70s/80s slasher film, horror film, as we've established in tons of other horror films from this era. There's a lot of sex in Halloween, in other films like that. We know what's going to happen to teenagers once they have sex in a 1980s slasher film. They're going to get killed off, and of course they do immediately afterwards. So it's kind of daft, I know. I did try and see it from the perspective of an 80s audience, though. I mean, of course, it's silly to me now watching it in 2021. I mean, I wasn't even born when this film came out, but I kind of think to myself, would I still think it was silly if I was watching it in 1980? I don't know. Obviously, I can't answer that question. Audiences seem to like it back then, so maybe back then that was just. I mean, obviously, it's not how a horror film would be made now. So maybe that was just it was just to do with the time it was filmed. I guess that makes sense, and it's in a way, I guess the 70s and 80s were kind of like that. They were sort of horror films in particular were just had that kind of cheap and tackiness about it, and it was all to do with the sex. So fair enough. But yeah, there's too much sex in it. But what can you do? It's an 80s film. So one major issue I do personally have with it is it just lingers on everything far too much. The camera shots, although sometimes the camera work can be quite good. For example, there's one scene where a girl goes into one of the huts and the camera's outside in the rain, and it just fixes on the window looking through at this girl in the hut for quite a good long moment, and that does quite work. It fixates on the build-up of certain scenes quite well. However, as I was going on to say, sometimes the scenes do linger far too long. It gets so dull and boring. I actually started, playing on my phone during a lot of this film, because there are just far too many scenes that just go on and on and on without anything happening. That's, I think, one of the downsides of this film. There's not enough energy. There's not enough kinetic energy, movement. There's not enough stuff going on, long enough to keep you engaged. I'm speaking for myself, but the scenes just carry on and on and on that don't need to. For example, there's this one scene where a guy is filling up a tank full of petrol, a vehicle tank, and it just fixates on him in the dark, not even with much light, filling up a tank of gas, on a truck or something. And then he gets killed off. And then immediately after that, get this, the girl, she just makes coffee. There's this scene where the camera there's no dialogue, there's no music or anything. It's literally a scene of a young woman making 2 cups of coffee. That's it. That's literally all it is. She puts the kettle on. She prepares the cups. She opens the coffee jar, gets it down off the fridge, puts 2 teaspoons of coffee in, closes the jar, puts it up on the. Then she goes into a larder, and you think, oh, what's going to happen here? Is she going to see something? No, she just simply comes out with sugar. But the one thing that I did notice about that film, yes, it does linger. It's far too long. Unnecessarily long for no particular reason, but during that scene you can actually see that the girl is agitated about something. You can see that she's worried about something because her friends have gone missing. You can see that she's thinking about something. The cogs are turning in her head. So there is that to it. You can see that maybe that's why they did it. Maybe that's why they deliberately made that scene that long, so you could kind of get the fact that she's distracted by the fact that her friends have gone missing, what's happening to them. So there's kind of that. However, that doesn't explain the other scenes that go on too long, because they do, a lot of them. There's too much singing around the campfire playing guitar, there's too much sex, as I say, there's too much silence in the scenes where this happens. And not even the climax where Mrs. Voorhees reveals herself as the killer, not even that's too exciting, because there's for example, there's a scene where the girl notices that her friend is dead. She runs back into the cabin crying, obviously, because she's seen her friend dead. And then the camera fixates on this girl blocking the door. She ties something around a rope around the doorknob. And you think, great, okay, what's next? No, she then puts a chair in front of the door. Okay, what's next? She puts something else in front of the door. This is the thing I'm talking about. It fixates too much on something for too long, unnecessarily. Just put the rope around the door and move on to the next bit. And there's a lot of that. As I say, even after Mrs. Voorhees has revealed herself as the killer, there's too much of that. There's too much. It just, you can see, obviously, this bothers me quite a bit about the film. It just needed more movement. The pacing of it just needed to be faster, more movement, more energy, more kinetic energy, more stuff going on. But there just isn't. There's not enough of that. It doesn't keep me engaged personally. As I say, there was a lot of scenes where I was on my phone just, waiting for the next bit to happen. I can't remember how I felt about it the first time I saw it, but I don't recall feeling any different towards it. when I first saw it. The running time of the film is something that works, I think. It's about an hour and 30, hour and 35, your typical 90 minutes, and I think that's about right. Maybe it could have got away with shaving maybe 10, 15 minutes off that, but any longer than that, and oh my God, I don't think it would have kept me engaged long enough. It just barely managed to at this running time. I think it's mercifully not short, but it's mercifully the right amount of time. Because any longer and it just wouldn't have worked too much. The ending is kind of famous. It's actually made it onto the ending of the film makes it onto like top 100 best film endings and stuff like that. I kind of agree. Unfortunately, it's the kind of ending you can only see once for the proper effect, the proper reaction. Because obviously, once you've seen it, you know what's going to happen next time you see it. But it's still good. It looks good. Again, practical effects on the Jason kid that comes out of the lake. It does genuinely look gruesome, I think. I've seen backstage photos of the kid that was made up to look like Jason, and it genuinely does look pretty good, even up close. It's good. However, I think most critics agree, most reviewers and whatever agree that the ending is completely ruined. Because what they do is they do a dream sequence, that old thing that we see so many times, too many times, where something like that happens. The girl's in the boat, she's killed Mrs. Voorhees, she's on the boat, it's the next morning and it's a beautiful sunny morning and it's all peaceful, the music's a nice different sort of relaxing, peaceful trill. She's on the canoe on the lake and then all of a sudden out he comes, Jason. The kid Jason comes and grabs her, pulls her down, and the camera slowly moves down to the lake, to the water surface. And you think, oh, brilliant ending. Jason, the kid, is alive, and he's dragged her down to the depths of the water, and credits roll. No, they don't. Because of course, then we get the smash cut. Oh, it was a dream, or was it? And even then, that last scene where she wakes up in the hospital bed and the police officer says that we found no boy, and she goes, where's the boy, Jason, the kid that dragged me down to the water? We didn't find a boy. And then it ends. So was that really necessary? Of course it wasn't. Of course it wasn't necessary at all. Why did they do that? They should have just ended when he comes up and drags her down into the water and the camera goes down to the water and then the credits should roll. That would have been a perfect ending. And there didn't even have to be a sequel after that. It could have just ended and you think to yourself, what the hell just happened? Brilliant. But it didn't end like that. I can't stand it when they add additional bits onto an ending that could have been perfect. I hate that. I really hate that. So yeah, that's the ending's kind of good and bad. It's good because it has a great bit where he comes up and drags her down into the water. But then, of course, we smash cut to the dream sequence and, oh, God, I hate that bit. So yeah, could have done without that. I think we all could. But Friday the 13th. It's a cult favourite. I'll admit it's a cult favourite. For me as well. There's something about it. It's fun enough. It's cheesy. It's tacky. It's a camp horror, not camp as in camp, but it's a camp horror, a horror that takes place at a camp. It has basically every horror, every slasher horror cliche under the sun. But there's something fun about it, I guess. And as I say, I respect it and admire it for creating, the Jason character eventually. Not for this particular film, but the preceding ones. I respect it for that. I appreciate that Jason has become a great character, and he is a great character, I suppose. Especially when because even in the second one, he doesn't wear the hockey mask. It takes a while for him to physically become the, to get the look that we're familiar with. But when we do, yeah, he's a good character. He's a scary character. You fear him. I mean, you kind of think, there's a supernatural element to him because he can never die. They kill him and then he keeps coming back. And yeah, I kind of like it for that. But as this first film, just regarding this first one, it's not perfect not by a long way. It's not brilliant. It's not engaging. Not really. It has engaging moments, but not the entirety of it. But it's fun enough. That's how I kind of look at it. It's fun enough. If you fancy, like on Friday the 13th, if you just fancy sitting down, maybe with some food, some chocolate or popcorn, whatever, and you just fancy watching a bit of traditional sort of 80s cheesy camp horror, yeah, I think it works. Just about. But if you want something that's going to like terrify you properly, no. Because I found myself laughing at quite a lot of this. I was just chuckling away because there's nothing genuinely horrifying about it, at least not today, not anymore, not watching it in 2021. As I say, maybe there was back in the 80s, fair enough, but no, not for me now. And I don't think for any audience now. So yeah, if you fancy just, when Friday the 13th comes around, if you fancy just sitting down, especially if it's like wet and raining, turn the lights out, put this film on, make a bit of popcorn, enjoy it, have a laugh, at a bit of classic 80s cheesy camp horror with lots of teenagers having sex and getting killed in ridiculous ways. And yeah, but other than that, it's Friday the 13th. Yeah, it's fine. What do you guys think of this film, this franchise? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, especially this first one, because I've heard different opinions from different reviews, and it's interesting to me. So let me know. Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit the like and subscribe and share and all that jazz. And keep an eye out for these videos I'm working on, please, because I am working so hard on these videos, you've no idea. Got some good ones coming up though, so keep an eye out. Until then, guys, stay safe, and see you guys later. Bye!